In this video, I will show you how I glue down a transfer sheet to linoleum. I will be using the traditional Mokuhanga style using kento or registration marks. I will also talk about the tools and materials needed, how I set up the design file in Photoshop, prepping the block, cutting the registration marks, and finally gluing down our design. Now let's get started. Here are some of the tools and materials that you will need for the job. You'll need a ruler, a knife, a cutting knife, probably a Sharpie. I'm going to be using a Baron, but you could also use the back of a wooden spoon or maybe a roller or brayer to flatten down the design after you glue it to the surface. Scissors are handy. We have chisels for kento cutting or registration mark cutting. You'll need a sandpaper to prepare the block. This is like a 220 grit sandpaper. You'll need a design, which we have a early 16th century woodcut design from a booklet from France. You'll need nori paste, which is very important, and you'll need the block itself, which is a piece of linoleum. A pencil comes in handy as well. First, we need to prepare the surface of the linoleum block. I do that by misting a little bit of water on the surface, and I use a 220 or a 60 grit sandpaper. Here I just have a piece of 220 double-sided tape down to a piece of wood block, and I'll just go over the whole surface in multiple directions, and it forms like a paste or a slurry. And after you're done covering the whole surface, you just wipe that clean with a rag, and a damp rag, and you make sure that there's no more dust left on the surface. If you don't prepare or sand the block surface, the design will not stick with the glue. It will peel up. So this is a very important step if you're gluing anything down to a piece of linoleum. Next, we need to talk about how I set up the file from Photoshop before I print out the transfer paper. So I always print to scale the image that I'm going to be working on, and I'll see if it's the appropriate size for the block that I'm using and also for the paper that I'm going to be printing on. So this was roughly the size that I was interested in, and once I have that confirmed, I always put a border around the image, which will be the paper's edge. After I print out the transfer sheet with the gampi paper, I then cut right along the edge of this border. And this is what it looks like after I cut around the border. So now this is a transfer sheet. It's a piece of gampi glued to a piece of copy paper. And I will be gluing this design down right here. Now it's time to position and cut the registration marks. So I will take my design, and often I will hold the design up to the light, and I can trace with a pencil on the back the edge of the area that I'm going to be working on. So this is just a rough shape. So then when I'm positioning it on my block face down, I can now see where that line is. So I want to make sure that the whole design lands on the block, so we're not hanging off of the edge of the block. I made enough room for this one. There's a lot of clearance. You can also just bend the paper over like with your finger. And then when you flip it over, you can see the crease, knowing that it's that you have enough space there. So you want to make sure it's positioned properly. And if you're using a wood block for this, sometimes there'll be knots in the wood, and you want to make sure that the knots of the wood are not in the actual design. Now this is a large design that's covering the whole surface of the block. So we want to just make sure that it all lands on the block. So this will be perfect right here. So once you have your design in the right place, I'll just make some marks in the corner where this is going to be. And then I can come back with a straight edge, just line up those marks from the edge of the paper. And you can use a Sharpie so that you can see it better, or a pen, or a darker pencil. And you can make a couple straight lines. And for this vertical, you'll need something that's square. I like to take a piece of cardboard. I'll line this up. So we need this 90-degree edge. So this will be the corner kento, and the flat part of the kento or registration marks. It's a good idea to always double check your placement before you cut the registration marks. So you just line it up and you just double check that it's positioned properly. This is a good spot for it. Now let's cut the corner registration. I have you zoomed in here so you can see a little bit better. So I'm just taking my flat chisel and I'm just going to line up the chisel. I'm going to overlap the line a little bit with the cutting tool. Before I cut down, I'm going to make sure my tool is dead vertical. You don't want to cut on a low angle. You want it to be vertical. And I'm just going to press this tool into the material. Linoleum is a very soft material, so you don't want to go crazy here. I'm just going to rock the cutting edge into the surface. And I'm going to do the same thing on this surface, or this line. Line it up. Check to see if my tool is vertical. And again, I'm just going to slightly rock this tool into the linoleum. After that's finished, I'll take my tool and I'll turn it upside down. And I'll just cut with it on an angle. I just cut one cut into the block, or into that corner. And again, I come back and do this side. You don't have to go too deep here. This is a little too deep. I would say don't go, take small cuts. But now, this is the perfect corner for your paper to go into. I also like to mark the registration like this, so that visually I can see that this is the corner kento. So that when I'm clearing and carving, I don't accidentally carve this away. So now let's carve our flat registration mark. And to do that, let's get our design and we'll place it into the registration and we'll find a nice area for our hand to land. You don't want the registration to be too close to the corner of the paper because you can't hold the paper. And you don't want it to be way over here because there's too much paper. So you just find a nice area for your hand. It's about a third, maybe a third or a quarter of the way down the length of the paper. And I'll just mark that. And that's where I'm going to cut the registration. It's right here. Again, we take our flat chisel. We line this up with the edge. Check that the tool is vertical. And just press down lightly. Just rock it into the surface. And now for this kento, I'll use a couple different chisels to clear away the material. So first I'll just take this little U-gouge, and at the edges, it's hard to see, so I might make a mark where the edges are. It's right here and here. So from the edges, just clear some of this material away. Now I'll come back with a bullnose chisel on an angle. And that's really all you need to create that edge for the paper to hit. So when we line up our sheet again, that's a perfect stop. You can see it's a perfect stop for the paper. You can also continue to make this shape by just either taking a knife, or this is a little U-gouge. You can, you can continue that shape. You just don't want to take material away so that you take any of the design away. So you want to be careful how much material you take away here so that you're not cutting into the design. So always be careful there. Now let's prep our transfer sheet for gluing down. I always like to start a corner. So you just have to put a little bit of moisture and you just want to peel the corner back just a little bit, like so. You just want to get it started. And you take a scissor and you'll just cut the backing paper, which is the copy paper, so you at least have a corner that's started. So now when I glue this down, it's easier for me to just hold down the gampi paper and we can start peeling the backing paper off. So that's something that I always like to do first in prepping the transfer sheet. Now we need to apply the glue to the linoleum surface. For this I use nori. I find this to be the best glue for gluing down to linoleum and also to wood blocks. So we want to put a generous amount onto the surface. And we want to make sure we cover the whole surface. So I'm just pushing this in with my fingers. I'm just working it slowly into the whole block's surface. I'd say it's better to use a little bit more glue than it is to use it sparingly. Because if you don't use enough, because this is soaking into the block a little bit, especially with wood. But if you don't use enough, your transfer sheet will peel up as you're carving, especially when you're carving fine lines. So you want to make sure you really get enough glue on the surface. You don't want to go crazy, but if you move your finger, if you press your finger roughly, you could see the glue is on the surface. Once I covered the whole surface, I'll just kind of go over it again. You can kind of feel that it's equally applied. Now you have some time here. You have a couple of minutes probably. So I like to just go wash my hands off and then I come back and I glue it down. So if you do wash your hands after you use the glue, just make sure you dry them really well, because you don't want to get water on the transfer paper. It can expand and contract. So now it's time to glue down this design. So again, face down, we're going to put it into our corner and into our flat, and we're going to hold it there with our fingers, and we're just going to let it fall down and lightly, making sure it doesn't slide. We're just going to smooth it out from the center out to the edge. Now we don't have tons of time here. I use a Baron, but you could use a spoon or you could use a brayer like this and roll it out to the edges, making sure, but the best tool is a Baron. So you just smooth it out to the edges. And now once that's down, you can just slowly, making sure if this is peeling up, you just go down and you can press it down with your finger, and you just slowly peel the backing sheet off. And here is our design, fully glued down. You want to see if there's any air bubbles, and if there are, just take a piece of scrap paper and gently go over the area. And again, we can cover the whole area. Now it's time to just wait for the glue to dry. So I would say at least an hour, maybe 2 hours, and then you can start carving. So that is my full gluing and transferring process. I hope you learned something from this video. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. Feel free to subscribe to my channel if you're interested in printmaking or any other art making tutorials. Thank you for watching and happy carving.